Hey guys, welcome back to Mo's Game Table. Today we're going to take a look inside MacArthur's War, the Korean War and beyond. This is a game designed by Kerry Anderson and published by Microgame Design Group. This is a Ziploc game, so there's no back of the box, so I'm going to give you a quick rundown on what this game is all about. This game simulates the historical campaign as well as allowing for what could have happened if MacArthur had been given the go-ahead to launch his attacks against Communist China. Players will assume either the role of Douglas MacArthur, Commander-in-Chief of the United Nations Forces, or the Chinese General Staff. Confronted with the Korean crisis, players can manage the conflict at a limited level or escalate it into an Asian or global showdown between the superpowers. So let's jump right in and take a closer look at all the components. And we start off with the cover sheet, and on the back of that we have the strategic display, a couple of player aids, our rules, our counter sheet, and our maps. So let's set up the maps and take a closer look at the game. And we'll take a look at the map that comes with the game. You're going to take the two sections, you're going to put them together, you create a 17 by 22 inch map. And as I've said with the other games from Kerry, you just cut that white strip off and then you just overlap one on top of the other, slap down some plexi, and you're good to go. You see it covers South Korea all the way into North Korea, Red China, and the Soviet Union. The top right, we have the weather table that we're going to be following along with, and then the game record track, as well as the turn record track, and then the terrain key down at the bottom. We've got clear, rough, mountain, water, major cities, cities and ports, and then there is also rail, borders, and rivers. There's no roads on the map, but anything that is clear hex is considered roads, so that way you can have road movement when you choose to do so, as well as rail movement throughout the map. Next, we'll take a look at the player aids that come with the game, starting off with the strategic display. There are two different types of movement. You have sea movement, which is in the circles, and then land movement, which is in the squares. You'll also see the color coding here in green for United Nations forces and the red for Communist forces. You'll use this to move troops around globally and then bring them onto the game map. Next, we have the escalation ladder and the collateral damage table. On the next sheet, we have the Asian conflict tables, which cover invasions of mainland China and Formosa. Then we have the European conflict table, the counter format giving us a breakdown of all the pieces of information on the counters, the unit types, unit sizes, as well as the abbreviations used in the game. On the back, we have the combat results table, the terrain effects chart, interdiction results table, weather results table, and the weather effects chart. Next, we'll take a look at the counter sheet that comes with the game. We have U.S. forces at the top, including Army and Marine Corps, Nationalist Chinese, United Nations, some administrative counters, including mushroom clouds, because yes, nuclear weapons can be used in this game, Republic of Korea forces, Soviet Union, Korean People's Army, and then the Red Chinese will finish out the balance of the counter sheet. Now we'll take a look at the rules. This is a 12-page rulebook. Start off with the introduction, listing of the game components, the game scale, preparation for play, and then the sequence of play on page 1. On the next page, we have an outline of the sequence of play, and all of the phases are listed out for you. Get into weather, the effects on available air points, airborne and amphibious operations, movement, and combat. Then we get to escalation, and that's where we talk about the escalation ladder that we saw in the player aids. There are 5 steps on the escalation ladder: incident, police action, limited war, Asian war, and global war. And this is where it gets pretty interesting, because each step allows you a certain number of forces. You can try to escalate, and if you escalate and fail the first time, you can try it a second time, but if you fail a second time, that's going to be game over at that point. Then we get into air power, different types of uses for air, like interdiction. Then we can also use radioactive waste, which is kind of neat, because that is something that MacArthur had thought about, was dropping radioactive waste into different locations to be an area denial weapon. Air power and combat, and then we get into reinforcements, strategic movement, and this is where they use the strategic display that we looked at before that's on the back of the cover sheet. Sea movement, airborne and amphibious landings and assaults, and then the rail movement at the bottom right. Then we get into the 7th Fleet counter, naval bombardment, amphibious landings and assaults, and then off-board conflicts. You have Formosa and China, Shanghai and Taipei, and they give you all the procedures for those as well as Europe. Then we get into movement, the different types: ground movement, overrun, entering and exiting the map, road movement here. And this is something I got to clarify, because remember I said before that all of the green areas on the map just have assumed roads, and you can use road movement. Well, only the UN and Soviet units may conduct road movement. The Chinese and North Korean units are incapable of road movement. So that's something that I wanted to clarify when it comes to moving in those green hexes, those clear hexes. Then we have stacking, zones of control, supply, atomic bombs, because remember I said you can use atomic bombs here in combat. You're going to have that in this game. You have that option to see if you want to drop some nuclear weapons strategically, or you can hit ports, or you can hit units, things like that. So pretty interesting aspect here. Then we get into combat itself on page 9. Then we have the combat procedure, train effects, combat results, retreat, advance after combat, surprise. In the first 2 turns of the game, KPA gets 2 column shifts in June and 1 column shift in their favor in July. So that's pretty neat, because remember, North Korea attacked the South, so that's how you get that modeled in the game. Then we have the Chinese wave attacks, guerrillas. This is kind of neat too. The KPA player can remove KPA units and instead use them as guerrillas in a future turn. And the guerrillas can be behind enemy lines, not only behind enemy lines, but inside of an enemy ZOC. So that's kind of neat. Then we have ending the game and determining the victory levels. Then we get into the scenarios. First scenario is June 25th, 1950. And then the second is on the back of the rulebook, November 26th, 1950. And then we finish out the rules with the designer's notes. And that is a look at everything you get inside of MacArthur's War, the Korean War and beyond. This is a game designed by Kerry Anderson and published by Microgame Design Group. I like what Kerry did here, because you're not only dealing with the Korean War itself, you're dealing with the global perspective also. You have the strategic display. You're going to have to be moving units around the different spots in the world, because you're going to have the invasion of mainland China, the invasion of Formosa, European conflicts are going to happen. You also have to deal with the escalation ladder from incident all the way through to global war, and each will have its own replacements, air points, and victory point costs. You can also use radioactive waste as an area denial weapon, and nuclear weapons are also used in this game. But it's not just a simple, hey, if you roll a 6 or roll a 1, the game is over because the world blew up in a big, huge nuclear holocaust. No, here you can use them, and it's not going to be like that. Now, things can escalate, of course, but you won't know how bad it was in using those nuclear weapons until at the end of the game when you count up your victory points. So that's pretty neat. I like that whole idea of what's the risk versus reward. So this is like a little game with a big premise, and I think that's really, really neat, and I'm looking forward to getting this one on the table. Well, I hope that helps you guys out if you're curious about this one. If you have any comments or questions, post them down below. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.